There's a war going on in South Central.
One of the longest running wars in the history of this country.
There can always be someone outside that's ready to kill me because of where I've been at.
In the southern portion of the richest city in the richest state in America lays a cluster of neighborhoods. Their streets and boulevards laid out in a grid between concrete ribbons of freeway. 10 miles to the west is the Pacific Coast Highway and the beaches of Santa Monica. 5 miles to the north is Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. 7 miles to the east is the corner of Hollywood and Vine. 25 miles south lays Orange County and Disneyland. Surrounded by the California dream, this region has its own legacy. On its streets erupted the country's most violent outbreak of civil unrest. Not once, but twice.
The most significant thing was when I went to join the Boy Scouts. Okay, the Boy Scouts of America. My mother takes me up to the Scout Troop at Goodyear Rubber Plant, where the original blimp is from 1933 to 1983 parked in our neighborhood right there. So I go up there to join the Boy Scouts. My mother takes me up to the Scoutmaster. He was nice, but he tells my mother, well, I don't know, but some of the parents might object because it was a white troop. So they say, be prepared, do a good turn daily. A scout is trustworthy, loyal, hopeful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, brave, clean, and reverent. See, that's the Boy Scouts of America, a bunch of racists.
We couldn't be Cub Scouts, couldn't be Boy Scouts, couldn't be Explorer Scouts. We couldn't get involved in organized activity that would take us anywhere that would bear us any kind of good fruit. You see? So we built an auxiliary alternative.
I used to get stopped by the police all the time. My mother always said, well, what did you do this? I said, I didn't do anything. See, people, including parents, could not believe that the man just stopped you all the time.
Young black men in this society have always been represented as the most threatening figures across the board.
They're viewed as being people who will commit crimes.
From 1950 to 1966, the Los Angeles Police Department was commanded by Chief William Parker.
Chief Parker ran the police department like a military unit, and the people who bore the brunt of this were the black residents.
Shut it off and get out of that car with your hands up. Get your hands up, I said. Drop that purse and get your hands up.
And so the cops were treating these young black men as though they were enemies, as though they were in warfare.
Get them up. Get your hands up. Right this way.
It was an open secret that one of the tacit duties of the LAPD was to make sure people were in the right neighborhoods at the right time. And Alameda Boulevard was the white curtain in LA.
You didn't cross Alameda for no reason at all.
East of Alameda, these were white areas. Linwood, Southgate, we couldn't go there. You had cops that didn't want you there.
And blacks that deigned to cross the line were quickly put in place by police officers.
There are barriers, invisible barriers, social barriers, and their job is to reinforce that barrier.
We'd get stopped, we'd get harassed. What are you doing here? You're supposed to stay in your neighborhood.
One time I was walking down the street on 77th and Central, and the man said, hey, you. I heard him, but I kept walking. He said, hey, you, and they ran on the curb, jumped out the car and said, didn't you hear us calling you? I said, I heard you say you, but my name is not you. So, get up against the wall and such and so on. and they tell me I look like I've been robbing. I said, well, how does a robber look? He said, looks just like you.
And so you feel this sense of alienation. You're culturally disoriented. You don't have a sense of identity in terms of who you really are.
So the idea was to create not only a segregated society, but the idea that those of darker hue were inferior and should be treated as such.
And after a while, you begin to internalize this, and you develop a deep-seated self-hatred because you see yourself as having almost no value.
In a free society, I'm walking down the street and police got the nerve to ask me, where you going? Where you coming? Ain't none of your damn business where I'm going. And ain't none of your damn business where I came from. Fuck you talking about where you going? He gonna ask me, what are you doing here? You go anywhere and ask anybody else what they doing there? You stop and ask anybody else in this society, man, why do you exist? You understand what I'm saying? But you got the nerve to ask me that all day, every day. Now, what do you think that does to me psychologically? What does that tell me? What message am I being fed every day? See, you don't understand that every day he's feeding me a spoonful of hatred. Every day, that's my diet. Spoonful of hatred. You see? And it's just a question of when is this going to erupt? And upon whom is it going to erupt? Am I going to attack myself? Am I going to attack my brother? You understand? Am I going to attack my own image in the mirror? Or am I going to eventually attack the cause of my anger and my frustration? But the point is, I'm a walking time bomb. I'm going to go off someday, somewhere, on somebody. The question is, upon whom?
At 7 p.m. on August 11, 1965, near the corners of 116th and Avalon, 21-year-old Watts resident Marquette Fry was pulled over by the California Highway Patrol on suspicion of drunk driving. A routine traffic stop until police insisted on impounding Fry's car, despite being less than 2 blocks from his home. Fry's mother, Rena, who owned the car, joined the rapidly growing crowd, who, along with Marquette, grew increasingly belligerent over what they felt was the heavy-handed police response. LAPD reinforcements were called in, a scuffle broke out, and Fry, his mother Rena, and brother Ronald were all taken into custody. The squad cars rolled away, but the crowd continued to swell as word of the incident swept through the neighborhood.
When I walked up on 115th and Avalon, Charles McQuarter from the D'Artagnans, I said, man, what happened? He said, they jumped on Marquette.
We just got more and more upset. It was a cumulative thing. It was one racist traffic stop too many.
By 8:15, over 1,000 Watts residents were surging up and down Avalon Boulevard. But by 1 a.m., despite 29 arrests and sporadic reports of vandalism, the situation was assessed by the LAPD as being under control.
Clear the sidewalks up ahead. Please go in your homes. Please go in your homes.
Thursday morning dawned tense, but relatively quiet. At 2 p.m., a meeting was called at a neighborhood rec center, assembling representatives from various community groups, elected officials, the LAPD, the media, and even Rena Fry.
I think that we must stay off the streets. I think the civil rights drive in America has demonstrated that violence will never be the just end to the grievances we have.
But cutting through a call for order came a voice that only the night before was raised by thousands in the street.
See, and I'm gonna tell you something. Tonight it's gonna be another one, whether you like it or not. No, wait. Listen. We, the Negro people down here, have gotten completely fed up.
Our elders felt you should bite the bullet, suck it out. We know it's wrong. That you can show that you're greater than oppression by outliving it. Show that it doesn't work. It doesn't destroy you. That in the process, we will take the beatings.
Their parents are coming from places where black men are expected to step off the street and say, yes, sir, to a 12-year-old white boy. Where black men are lynched with regularity. And so from their perspective, Los Angeles looks wonderful. They're certainly aware of the flaws, but they recognize it's such an improvement. Their children, however, have a very different perspective.
We come along and say, we ain't gonna take shit. You took it, and we're not.
By that afternoon, crowds of African Americans again filled the streets. But this time facing over 200 LAPD and deputy sheriff officers.
So here we are in a crowd at night on Imperial and Avalon. Things were in such disarray, and we're facing cops in the street.
And they went to move the crowd back. See, so when the man moved on us, we moved toward him.
And so you're looking at one another, and you're reading the eyes of people in the crowd. There's the body language that says, let's go on and do this.
And then they fired some rounds in the crowd. See, all right, it's on now.
We were throwing rocks at police who were in the street, and they were taking position up behind their cars and firing. And I said, damn, they're shooting at us.
Cops have weapons and they had a law behind them. The citizens don't have anything behind them but their own heart, their own desire, their own determinations, and they're really fighting to survive.
And you cannot whoop us. We're already dead. We're already beaten down. We've been beaten down for 400 years. We already got the wounds inside and outside our bodies. How you gonna hurt us? You cannot threaten us. You cannot frighten us. We live in the most frightening places, under the most frightening conditions. We are immune to fear. We are immune to harm. You see what I'm saying? You have stepped into a cesspool. You're the only one gonna get infected.
By Friday morning, additional police were called in from all points of LA to squash what authorities were now terming a full-scale riot.
They said they call it a riot. There was no riot. We knew what the hell we were doing.
What you're seeing is guerrilla warfare, but the reason that you can't say it is because you never gave the so-called Negro credit for having enough intelligence to be strategist enough to practice guerrilla warfare.
But then what happens is that it becomes a big newspaper story, which increases political pressure on the authorities to do something.
And then they brought in 16,000 National Guard who don't know the terrain.
The National Guard in particular is not necessarily trained to engage in civilian crowd control.
We wanted to drive them out. And so the question then is, what do we do?
And we were opportunistic fighters. We didn't need stockpiles. We got dilapidated buildings. Here's a brick pile just waiting to be thrown at your ass. Here's a dilapidated building. Ain't nobody living there. You didn't fix it. You didn't remove it. Okay, it ain't nothing but a pile of bricks anyhow. That's coming at you. That whole building, brick by brick, is coming at your ass. That's what we throwing at you. The building, the bullshit, the rubble, the rubbish that we live in. That's what's coming at your ass. Those are our weapons. The filth, the funk, the shit you can't stand, that you defend, that you put a barrier between us and yourself. That's coming at you. It's coming at you.
At that point, they went to the other extreme, which was the iron fist, the iron hammer. And this leads to a virtual free fire zone where people could be shot for making the wrong turn at the wrong intersection.
The claim by police is that these were looters that were refusing orders to halt.
The autopsies clearly show that people were shot in the back. One has to really question whether or not a human life is worth a bottle of beer or a case of beer. That is to say, people were being killed for what, in retrospect, were the most trivial of offenses.
Looting didn't undermine anything because we're talking about desperate people. We're talking about people who have nothing, who see no hope.
This is a criminal, a lawless element with which we're confronted, and that the only thing they understand is force and power.
That's been the one taboo, is that black people and other oppressed people in this country are never to use violence to achieve what it is they want. But this country uses violence whenever it chooses, and then it legitimizes the violence.
Send me the message that my life is of no value, then how can your property, how can your society, how can your civilization, how can any of the mores or the rules or any of the monuments, how can any of that be of any value to me when all it has on the door for me is a rejection notice? I'm not allowed to look, I'm not allowed to touch, I'm not allowed to partake, I'm not allowed to participate. All my life, I was rejected before I was born. I am the most rejected. Nothing is open to me. And every time I knock on the door and get rejected, it takes a little something out of me. So how does it mean anything to me that I should try to salvage it, or I should respect it, or I should try to preserve it? It stands as a barrier before me. It was there when I was born. It will be there when I die.
The fact that it took them 5 days to shut down something they thought they could shut down in a day is a testament to that revolutionary spirit.
And so there was this sense of pride that we had taken a stand and that we had sent a message out to the world.
It's a small step for a man, but it's a giant leap for all mankind now.
Newspapers in Europe and other parts of the world carried the story, carried these images. And so, in a sense, it unmasked this country, showed this country for what it really was.
Prior to the 1960s, race riots as they existed were really riots of white people marauding through neighborhoods where blacks were living and attacking blacks. The riots of the 60s, Detroit, Chicago, New York, LA, these riots are completely different because they are really manifestations of black anger, black hostility. And that's very new. What distinguished Watts from the riots in Chicago and Detroit is that nobody thought it could happen here.
The whole environment of LA was supposed to be so much nicer than other parts of the country, but yet that image of LA that's in the public mind had nothing to do with the large numbers of black people living here in segregated conditions.
The other thing that the rebellion represented for us was it helped accelerate our consciousness from 65 until about 71. Gang activity in LA was at an all-time low because so many young people were joining organizations like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, like the Panther Party.
People, keep on learning.
This growing Black Pride movement saw the development of dynamic African American organizations committed to instigating change from within.
Keep on turning.
Former street fighters like Kumasi, Bird, and Ron now fought the power rather than other gangs, working alongside groups like the Black Panthers on civic programs that range from free breakfasts to neighborhood restoration to political activism.
Believers, keep on believing.
All them youngsters were busy trying to rebuild their communities, trying to build a future, trying to figure out where the fuck do we go from here together, and how do we give ourselves some kind of a future.
Gonna keep on trying till I reach the highest ground.
But this new Black Power structure quickly found itself in the crosshairs of government agencies like the FBI. According to recently declassified documents, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover launched a covert counterintelligence operation against the Black Panthers, an organization he described as the greatest threat to the internal security of the country.
They turned around and squashed those movements.
Former Slauson and Panther chapter founder Al Prentice Bunchy Carter and John Huggins were gunned down at a UCLA black student meeting, while Black Panther founders Huey Newton and Bobby Seale faced arrest and lengthy jail sentences. Within a few short years, many of America's most influential, iconic black leaders had either been incarcerated or assassinated.
They ran them down, they chased them down, they hunted them down, they murdered everybody that they could and made everybody else either go to exile or they locked them up in the penitentiary. And when all that was over with, a new element rose up called the Crips. You see? And the shit started again.
9046, stand by. Two suspects. Suspect one, a male black hair, dark eyes. Dark complexion and medium length natural. Suspect two, male black. Short black natural. White t-shirt, no further description.
There's really no room in this world for soft motherfuckers, man. Soft motherfuckers don't eat.
I wrestle with my moral issues a lot, man, because I know that ultimately this ain't the way that God or society intended it to be. So a lot of times, man, I know morally I'm a good individual, but sometimes I gotta put that moral state of mind behind me and become an animal.
II, 85, 90% of the black population of this country lives in the South.
Black people had primarily lived in the South because of slavery, and the South was a rural, agrarian, a farm economy.
World
War II ushers in a series of transformations that radically change the nature of black history in this country. Blacks, for the first time, are invited en masse to work in America's industrial arsenal for democracy, building those tanks, building those planes, building those ships. Between 1940s and 1970s, you see over 4 million African Americans leave the South in ways that had never occurred before. Head for New York, head for Chicago, head for Los Angeles. For the first time, they were integrated into the American work economy. They were earning enough to be lower middle class homeowners in LA and to establish, if not exactly, a very close similarity to the American dream.
LA didn't have the overt history with racism that one had in the South.
There were no laws that said blacks had to ride on one part of the bus. There were no laws that said blacks had to be in certain schools. There were, however, an extremely exclusive web of racially restricted housing covenants that kept blacks in particular areas and out of other areas.
These covenants mandated the sale of real estate along racial lines in an effort to keep traditionally white neighborhoods free of non-desirable homeowners.
Sometimes non-desirable meant Latino, sometimes non-desirable meant Jew, sometimes non-desirable meant Asian, but it always meant black. And so those racially restrictive covenants, which didn't disappear until the late 40s and early 50s, essentially kept blacks circumscribed in a very narrow portion of the LA County region.
Black people were sort of forced to live on top of each other because it just wasn't possible to live where you chose, even though you might have been able to afford it.
So if you come up in a home when there is no male influence, there's no strong male influence, then everything is going to be out of whack. Have a subculture of young black men pretending to be men by killing each other or by standing up in a bravado manner. But they're misguided.
Well, I'll sit here and I'll tell you that I didn't become a man until I was 38 years old. Because I had to hold the hand of a man. It was just that simple. A man had to stoop low enough to take me out of the gutter and say, hey, this is the way to go. This is what you do. This is how it's done.
Nowadays, the fathers or the black men my age are either dead or in jail. And one of the problems we have is if they're going to try to arrest the problem, that means they're putting all the black men in jail.
A 2003 Bureau of Justice report reveals that 28% of African American men, more than 1 in 4, will be jailed or sent to prison in their lifetime.
We have engaged in this country in an absolutely historically unprecedented experiment in mass imprisonment. We now have an imprisonment rate that is 6 to 7 times higher than it has ever been before in our history.
It's a hustle called capitalism. Got my niggas in prison or stuck in the system, yeah.
And in 2007, California's governor announced plans to spend $7.4 billion to build 40,000 new prison beds.
I'm from a place where the fucking Terminator is the governor.
If you look at the population of the people in the penitentiary, particularly from the 1980s going forward, black men are disproportionately represented. That's the new cotton field right there, the pen.
Concrete slave ships never move. When niggas like us get used like a mule, don't let them catch you, arrest you, strip and undress you, throw you in a cesspool.
What this means is we are breaking up even the possibility of there being intact families with a mother and a father present, raising a child together.
The nigga
Because we are sending the men off to prison at unprecedented rates, usually for nonviolent offenses.
The ghetto is a nigga trap, take the cheese. Soon as you do it, here come the police. Invented and designed for us to fail. Where you gon' end up dead or in jail. The ghetto is
Even with time served, many of those determined to start a new life find little freedom in their release.
I go to get a job, I'm working for Xerox, and I lied on the application, and they found out I was on parole, and I lost my job.
There's never no cycle to get us out of this. There's just a cycle to get us back into it.
So of course people are going to behave in ways that are antisocial if we don't let them behave in pro-social ways.
When you hear America saying there's gonna be a war on crime, to a black person that means that's a war on black people.
When they say a war on gangs, I say that's a war on me. When they say war on drugs, I say that's a war on me. Every war they got is a war against me and my people.
We need to come in here and solve this problem, not attack this problem, because here's a people that's already angry. I don't have nothing to lose if you attack me, sir. I'm being attacked every day anyway. I'm being shot at every day anyway. So you shooting at me, you putting me in jail don't mean nothing to me.
That's where the gang problem, so-called, is. It's been redefined as a crime problem and a gang problem, but it's really an issue of no work and dysfunctional schools and so on.
We know that what we've been doing to deal with gang violence isn't working, but we just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And then we say, well, the fact that it isn't working doesn't mean that we're acting out of ignorance or maybe we need to learn something. We say it just proves that these kids are unredeemable.
It's a belief that our society did not contribute to the formation of this problem. That's the story of the scapegoat. The gang member is the scapegoat. Nothing's our fault, it's their fault. We didn't create them. They're inevitably incorrigible.
This continuing atmosphere of denial virtually guaranteed that history would repeat itself. On April 29, 1992, 27 years and 5 miles away from the flashpoint of the 1965 Watts Rebellion, rioting again broke out. The most violent, costly outbreak of civil unrest in U.S. history. The explosion of angry protests was touched off by the outcome of the controversial Rodney King LAPD police brutality trial.
The message to the community is that the system does not deliver justice. It does not work for us. So we have to find our justice in the streets.
My home is your home. Well, welcome to the Terror Dome.
But unlike the 65 rebellion, which was primarily contained to Watts, the flames of 92 burned their way to the very doorstep of bordering affluent communities.
Marcus Garvey used to say that when all else fails to organize the people, conditions will.
And therefore, in 1992, the reasons all clustered together. And it happened again.
In the aftermath of 92's uprising, a high-profile private sector initiative was formed to create Rebuild LA. The $6 billion investment program defined its goals as long-term, systemic change and promised to create 74,000 new jobs within the riot zone over the next 5 years. But just 1 year later, with many South LA neighborhoods still in ruin, Rebuild LA quietly closed its doors.
A young generation of kids heard about this promise. They momentarily got their hopes up. They committed to this peace treaty, and instead they learned that it was just another fork-tongued promise of the man. It failed. We should have known what the future would be in other cities from here to Baghdad.
Gang warfare would resume, and for the next 15 years, continue unchecked, with almost no effective outside intervention.
See, cause I'm the motherfucking villain. The definition is clear, you're the witness of a killing.
You know what everybody looks at him and says? You're the worst motherfuckers in the world. We don't like you, we don't want you, we don't even want you to survive. We want you to go away. We want to pretend like you don't exist.
I'm coming straight out of Compton. When something happens in South Central Los Angeles, nothing happens. It's just another nigga dead.
A recent comparison of twin psychological studies by The Lancet and Rand Corporation indicates that children in South Los Angeles are exhibiting greater levels of post-traumatic stress disorder than children of a similar age in Baghdad, the war-torn capital of Iraq.
And if they don't get resources for these youngsters, what's going to happen? You got another group of angry children, another group of killers.
If someone right now said, what do you want in your life? I'll give you anything you want. What would it be?
Man, one thing, just one thing, freedom. No, man, you choose that because it's no hope. You in no man's land. It's no hope.
People taking choices of going to college and like that's like making a choice. Here you ain't making no choice. There's no choice. It's like you waiting for somebody to come save you, man, and you just ain't gonna never get saved, man.
Your reward for gangbanging is to be crippled, lamed for life. Your greatest reward is life plus 40 years. Your ultimate reward for gangbanging is death. And you don't come back from that.
Democracy. We have the resources. We're the richest country on earth. It is absolutely outrageous. It is inexcusable that we have failed to meet the most elementary tests of what it means to be fellow citizens and build a community.
She didn't
ingredient is to care about people and to love them. That's the ingredient, across the board. And to understand that they are human. They're not gang members, they're human beings.
One thing you have to realize, if you open them up, there would be a stamp under their shirt that says Made in America. Okay? Not no place else. They weren't made in Taiwan or, Indonesia. They were made in America.